Welcome to Sirlin on Design. Today we will talk about the Talos Principle 2. Okay, I'm here with my co-host, Mr. G Phantom, and are you ready to talk about the Talos Principle 2?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk a little bit about it. As someone who played 1, but did not play 2, I have a lot of questions.
Well, you can play the role of the audience then, because maybe some people in the audience will not have played 2. We will talk about non-spoiler things at the beginning. So if you're worried about, giving away things in Talos Principle 2, you can stick with us for a while and we'll let you know when it's time to go away and then, play the game and then come back and watch the rest. And also what we're doing here is not a review. We're just going to talk about why the game is the way it is and the design choices that were made.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Do you have any things you want to start off with before I just kind of go into my questions?
I have a lot of really negative things to say about this game. And I also have some very positive things to say about this game. And I honestly wish that someone from Crow Team ends up seeing this, because my goal here is not to trash them or make them feel bad, but they really do need to do better, frankly, on Talos Principle 3, even though they did some really great work on a lot of elements of Talos 2. I will tell you that there is a big thing that I'm dying to say, and it's kind of mirrors in our previous podcast about Talos Principle 1, where I also had a big thing that I wanted to say, and we had to hold it until after the spoiler section started. And I will tell you that the subject of the big thing I want to say is the same exact subject.
Oh, okay.
It's the same thing that we talked about at the beginning of that spoiler section. We're going to talk about again, only it's going to go a lot differently this time. Let's move on and talk about some things that we can talk about.
I'd love to just talk about kind of the puzzle aspects of the game that don't spoil the game. So just, just those basic solid elements about what makes puzzles good and whether or not they succeeded in that.
About the puzzles, I do have some good news for you. If we only cared about the puzzles, and that is the main part of the game, right? I mean, it's a puzzle game. It's a series of puzzles.
Yeah.
The puzzles in Talos 2 are really well done. And it's kind of weird that we could have a situation where I'm telling you that in this puzzle game, a game about solving puzzles, that the puzzles are really well done. I'm going to be as negative as I can be in some areas, given how good. There's a limit. I'm not going to tell you this is a 1 out of 10 game. No, this is a good game that you should probably buy. Mm-hmm. But I'm about as frustrated as you can be for a game that has excellent puzzles. Here's how I would put it. If we were to teach a course on game design, this game, Talos 2, its puzzles in particular, and the mechanics that appear in those puzzles should probably be part of the curriculum. As a positive example, a sequel needs to kind of be more of the same, but kind of not, kind of like a next step. Mm-hmm. And I feel like they exactly achieved that. So there's some mechanics in these puzzles. Well, there's a few mechanics that are exactly the same. They're literally the same mechanics. So it's familiar, and you feel like you're playing something in that universe. And then there are some new mechanics, like the first one you encounter, it really feels like what you know, but one more step, exactly in the bullseye of what you would want in a sequel. Yeah. And then some of the other mechanics that you get later, they feel a bit like fantasy fulfillment. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're stuck in a lot of these puzzles and you wish you could do something, cheaty or whatever.
Yeah.
But they give you some mechanics that are new that are like, oh, we could never do that kind of thing before. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
So that is great. You also mentioned that you hoped that a sequel would remove things that weren't really working.
Yes.
And I have fantastic news for you, because the mechanic that I hated the most, and I mentioned this in our previous podcast, you already know, I think, because I'm pretty sure you agreed with me. Mm-hmm. They actually completely replaced that with a new thing that works really well.
Okay.
That's as much as I'm going to say non-spoiler. The bottom line is really great job on this element of the game, which is the main element. So we're doing good so far.
I feel like that mirrors my experiences with some games as well, where the core kind of experience is really fun, like the actual thing you interact with. But everything that surrounds it is just kind of really lackluster. And you just wish you're just like, man, I wish I was just in those media rooms to be like, can we just tighten some of these things up? I would like to just get an idea, again, without spoilers, is whether or not you feel like the story was well put together.
What I want to emphasize is that the scope is bigger.
Hmm.
The scope of the whole game, the whole production is bigger. So that affects puzzles in a way, and also story. Like there is a bigger world to walk around in, you know, it's physically bigger. There's
Right.
more to it. There are actual characters. There are like animated characters that walk around. They can move, they can speak, their mouths move, they have voiceover.
Wow.
So
That's a big difference.
yeah. So that I know it is a big difference. That's not something that was in the first one.
Mhm.
So you see what I mean, that like there's more budget involved here as well as a bigger ambition.
Mhm.
And so that should immediately raise some questions. Like, I don't mean so much in general, but I mean specifically given what Talos 1 was like.
Mhm.
Because Talos 1 is so tight. I described it before as like a short story. Like everything has a purpose and there's nothing extra. There's nothing bloated. So when I tell you, oh, well, it's a bigger world to walk around in, you know, you should immediately be skeptical and you should say, well, does that make the puzzles better?
Mhm.
Is it better that like to get from puzzle A to B, you have to walk farther? And then on the story side, they had a good story before, I thought.
Mhm.
So does this bigger world with more characters, does that enable a bigger, better story? Okay. On the first, I know you asked about story, but you know, just really quick about the puzzles.
Sure.
I'm going to say the answer to that one is actually no, that like walking farther between puzzles doesn't really add anything.
It just makes it farther.
The world. Yeah. It makes it, you know, it's more for you to marvel at, right?
Okay,
Like
yeah.
there's a little bit of immersion and sense of world. So I'm not going to say like absolutely nothing
Okay.
is added, but I think it's real questionable whether that was worth it.
Right.
But the story is a little different of a story,
Mm.
a little different of a situation.
Yeah.
The setup, like the kind of premise that we start with, which I'll talk about after the spoiler section, I feel like is pretty solid. The bigger scope makes sense. There's a promise there of what it's being used for,
Okay.
about why we need to do this.
Mm.
And the question is, where do they go from there? Does the whole arc of the story, you know, eventually pay off and make this bigger scope worth it? And I think they dropped the ball. I see these high reviews and the game's puzzles are very good, but on this element, I don't know. I have some harsh things to say. So we'll get back to that after the break.
Still talking in topics of non-spoilers, how would you like describe that presentation of the story? Because I do feel like one of the things reviewers get really enamored with is like, even if the story's bad, if like the performances are good and the visuals are good, it kind of tricks them to thinking that the story is good. Do you think that's what might be happening here?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question because that is something we talked about on the Ghosts of Tsushima episode, how the presentation of the story is like really excellent. I'd say it's average. I mentioned in that podcast that when I watched Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a, you know, incredible, beautiful game.
Yeah.
That during the story sequences of that game, even though they are very well done, I would often think, oh, hard to make a game.
Mm-hmm.
Because of weird kind of facial animation stuff. I had the same feeling here. They're robot faces here, but still, it's hard to do even robot facial animation when doing emotions. So I'm not going to give it like A plus 10 out of 10 on this presentation, but I would say that it is pretty good. Like there's a variety of voice actors, kind of weird choices and what all their accents are. I don't know. I feel like it's trying to make a point of some sort. But I think the voice actors generally did a really good job.
Okay.
So they sell it, and the UI of it, like what it looks like and how you zoom in on them, and all of that it's fine. It's serviceable. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the building blocks you would want to tell a decent story.
Okay. And then the other thing that I want to kind of discuss before we move on to spoilers is creating stories for sequels and how hard that is, right? When we talk about story and expanding that story, a lot of decisions need to be made before you even write your first word. How much bigger is the story going to be, and how many more characters that we have to put in? That to me is always the big challenge when you look at these sequels. We can think about movies where first movie is really tight and told really well. I'm going to go with Rambo First Blood, right? Rambo First Blood is really great, and then they kind of teeters off. RoboCop, first one's good, and then kind of teeters off. Do you feel like the issues fell between in the details, or was it like this? Do you feel like it's something that might have been bad during the writing room, or like before they even put pen to paper?
I think you're eerily close to figuring out one of the problems here without even having seen the game.
Okay.
If we were to write a movie that was really good and then we wanted to make a sequel to that movie, we have a bunch of challenges as you've laid out.
Mm-hmm.
If we're trying to do the same thing for a game, if story is a key part of the game, it might be even harder in the game sense than the movie sense. And the problem is that in a game, there's certain gameplay that we expect to have. So in this puzzle game, we expect to solve a series of puzzles.
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever the sequel to our story is, it's really shackled to that in a way that like a movie maybe could go in a different direction more. But Talos 2 cannot go in a different direction than us playing a bunch of puzzles. It has to be that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has to come up with a story of that. I'm kind of reminded of the movie Die Hard. So Die Hard 1 is like really great. And then Die Hard 2 has the same character in like almost the same situation. Not exactly the same, but like, terrorists have taken over a thing and he's the road cop like again. And it's on the same day of Christmas again.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like one line, like a throwaway line that's a joke about, it's happening all over again or whatever, like trying to lampshade it. And it's sort of pathetic. So Talos 2 is faced with this same problem of how do you write a story where we basically do these puzzles all over again?
Yeah.
And
we'll talk about
how they fared on that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about it after this break then.
Yeah. Well, before we let people go who, don't want spoilers, let me just give a quick plug to Codex. So Codex is a customizable card game, but, no random packs. I wouldn't do that. That I developed over the course of like 10 years. And it turned out really good, I think. What it does is it gives you the ability to play that style of game for like a long time without ever buying new cards, because it's just jam-packed with all sorts of different strategies that a given faction can do. It's not like just one deck that can do one thing like a lot of games in the genre have. So that's what the big appeal of it is. But unfortunately, it's out of print. But fortunately, I've been working on a whole new version of it for a long time. And that new version is available on my Patreon right now. So you can go to patreon.com/Sirlin to see what that new version is about and see new content roll out over time. And I know you've played it. I think you think pretty highly of it too.
Yeah, I really love the original Codex. But this new one, what I think the most about it is there's a lot of streamlining that has occurred, and it just makes it a lot smoother to play, but still has all the same depth that I really appreciate. So definitely recommend people try it out. Give it a try. Play with some friends. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, all right. And if you join the Patreon, you can also see these YouTube videos at least 24 hours before anyone else. So we're gonna move on now to the spoiler section. So if you are worried about spoilers of Talos Principle 2, then go play the game, then come back and watch the video, watch the rest of this video. But here we go. Okay, spoilers. Oh, I'm going to start by just telling you what I was dying to tell you beforehand.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah, like the big story in Talos 1 was that it's not just about solving a series of isolated puzzles. They're actually connected by these star puzzles. The stars like kind of break the fourth wall in a sense. You can connect one puzzle to another or take an object from one puzzle to the outside world or something like that. And that made it so exciting, and it made the game inherently about transgression. That was the theme that we talked about in Talos 1. And it wasn't just a theme, not just a random theme. It's the perfect theme for a puzzle game like this, where the theme like matches the fantasy of what you want to do. Is you want to solve puzzles in kind of a tricky, outside the box way. Okay, so that's the big strength. That's the reason why Talos 1 is in my mind elevated to this like greatest puzzle game of all time, or one of the few greatest at the very least. So a game that has this amazing legacy. So what should it do for its sequel? I mean, surely it needs to double down on that, right? Like, go deeper into the idea of transgression as a theme, and certainly at the minimum, have the same kind of transgression mechanically, but maybe find a way to ratchet it up a notch. Maybe a whole secret broken underworld or computer land you can get into that you're not supposed to get into, and it looks all glitchy and broken, but you can secretly you're supposed to go there. Maybe they should do something like that. Oh no, they did the complete opposite. Actually.
Really? Wow.
They're like, what if there's hardly any transgression and it's like not a thing anymore? And it is such an incredible blunder. And Crow Team, if this is getting through to you got to fix this in Talos 3. You cannot do this again. This was one of the biggest missed opportunities that I can remember in a video game, and it's crushing. It's so disappointing. It's so disappointing. I can't believe that they don't care about this incredible thing that they had before.
Yeah, that's kind of shocking to hear, because the moment when you can kind of figure out how to get your first star, we described it in the first podcast as like the aha moment, like that. We realized that's what the game was really about. The normal puzzles were just kind of like training you basically to realize that like you're supposed to defy the rules. You're supposed to actually send lasers outside the boundaries. You're supposed to jump over walls, and you're supposed to do all these just crazy things to get these stars. And like, that's the whole point. Don't listen to the robot in the sky that tells you not to. Do the thing. Do break the rules. That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of this experiment. It's pretty disappointing to hear that they went away with it. I'm curious as to why they would do that.
I don't know. Often I have like a guess of how these things happen, and it's hard for me to guess. It seems that they just didn't realize that was such a important element of it all. I'll tell you what they do have. Like, it's not that there were stars and now there's literally zero. There's not actual zero to replace it. So I'll tell you what there is, if that gives you any clue. So there are the isolated puzzles, and then outside of that, in the world that you walk around between the puzzles, and remember that world is much bigger now. It's so big that it has signs all over the place that point you to the next puzzle so that you won't get lost. And it has, I forget the correct name of this, but at the top of the screen when there's like it looks like a ruler, has a bunch of lines and has north and west and so on.
The compass.
A compass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know what a compass is, but when it's displayed
that's
that way, I
not
think
technically
it's
compass. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll say compass. So the compass has the puzzles too. So say 8 or whatever, and that's puzzle 8 is that way. And it even has the location of the stars, basically. Just they don't. It's so big of a world, they don't want you to get lost, and they just tell you where to go to find these puzzles.
Sure.
So that's like kind of weird and bad to start with.
Yeah, questionable.
Now, it wouldn't be maybe that could be okay if the puzzles were awesome, and they just wanted to make sure you found like where they were or something.
Yeah,
but that's not how this works.
Right.
Okay, there's three types of these puzzles. Puzzles is not even the right word. There's 3 types of these things that are outside the main puzzles that can give stars. Okay, and I haven't told you anything about the story, but there is a whole thing in the story about weird like Greek gods that
gotcha.
magically appear.
Great.
Okay. So of the three things that are the, between puzzle stars, one of them is Prometheus type. One of them is Sphinx type, and one of them is Pandora type. So if it's Prometheus type, what that means is Prometheus, he gave us fire in the mythology. So he's holding up a torch, his statue. These are all statues. He's holding up a torch, and somewhere in the level, and I think he has like a little beam that kind of points you towards it. Again, don't want anyone to get lost. There is a blue, it's called a sprite, but just like some hovering blue fire. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what you have to do is find the hovering blue fire and touch it. And then the blue fire will automatically fly kind of slow or medium speed back to Prometheus and go into his torch. And you have to follow it back. Okay. And it stops a bunch of times to make sure that like you can't just ignore it and go back to Prometheus yourself. You have to like actually follow it because you have to click on it to keep it going every so often. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's what that is. And every time I did that in the game, I actually would say out loud, what genre is this? Why am I doing this? Is not a puzzle. Yeah. Right. It's not a puzzle in any sense. There's no puzzle element to it. Yeah. You touch the thing and it's like you're playing a Mario game, I guess, but like not really, because there's nothing interesting or challenging about it. Yeah. It's just sort of making sure you see a few things in the level, I guess. That's being real generous, even then. I don't know why it exists at all. It's just it's an activity. Maybe could have been an Animal Crossing or something.
It's just bizarre. An activity.
Just an activity. Okay, what about the Sphinx? Oh, that sounds puzzle-like. Okay, the Sphinx, the way that works is it shows you kind of a cryptic diagram of some sort. And maybe there's like an X on it or a few X's or something. So the diagram is like a place in the level, or maybe it's a rough map of the whole level. And it's telling you where to go to like click on a switch. And that's it. So it's like a find the pixel, quote unquote, puzzle. Okay. You just got to like go to the right area and then look around. And there were a couple of them that took me a really long time because you're looking like at a very vague map. I mean, map is generous even to call it. And you're in the world, like moving around, trying to find some tiny switch somewhere. It's not a puzzle, and it's not the right genre, and I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like an eye test.
Yeah. So that brings us to the third one, Pandora. Now, I have some good news for you. Well, Pandoras are actually puzzles.
Oh, okay. Well.
Okay. Yeah, it's picking up, huh?
Yeah.
So the way Pandora works is she is holding up her arm, and the targets where you're supposed to shoot a laser at it?
Yeah.
So she's got a target like up there that she's holding up.
Yeah.
And that means there's a target outside of the puzzles themselves. Yeah. So that's like a classic Talos 1 star puzzle thing.
That's
like,
right.
Oh, how do we get a laser there? Like, do we shoot it from a puzzle, or like, maybe there's a connector out in the world? Mm-hmm. You get the idea. So this is good. And there should have been way more of these. There's not many of them, like there's way fewer of this than there are way fewer of these than there are stars in the other games. So you're hardly doing this at all. And then of the ones that there are, some of them are like, okay. And a lot of them are disappointing.
That's unfortunate.
Let me tell you just about one.
Okay.
To give you a sense. It was memorable to me because of how disappointing it was.
Oh, okay.
So there's a puzzle where we know where the target is. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's how do you get a laser there?
Yeah.
And there's no obvious way to get a laser there. So that's a good start. That's a puzzle. Well, there's one puzzle that's on a cliffside, and it looks built a little bit conspicuously. Like if you did something in that puzzle, you could get a light source to the edge of that cliff, and then maybe that would be able to be seen by other puzzles. Okay. Yeah, that feels again like a good Talos 1 situation. Yeah, so it turns out you can put a light there. You can get a laser off of that cliff. Can it go to the place that you need to go? No, it can't.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So there's more to it. There's more steps. Well, where can it go? We can just look around. We can see what we can see. Well, there is another puzzle that's really far away off to the side, and it looks like maybe you could get something like into that puzzle. Now, I don't know how that would help, because that's not we're not trying to do that. We're trying to get to the target that Pandora's holding up, and she's not in any puzzle.
Yeah.
But maybe it's links of a chain, like maybe we get it. Maybe we're hopping from one to another. Okay. So I realized, yeah, you can get the light in there. And then how does that help? Well, there's another puzzle that's right by Pandora. So you really wish that one, you could just shoot a laser just right to her and just be done.
Yeah.
And not do any of this. But there's no connector in there. So there's no way to do that. Okay. Well, what if you could magically get a connector in there? Then you could actually complete the circuit that I just talked about.
Yeah.
You could go from the cliffside to the faraway one, and then you could get into the one that's right next to her, and then that would go to her. So if you could magically make there be a connector, then you would have connected 3 different puzzles to a Pandora, and it would be great. But there isn't. But you know what there is on that level, on that world? There's a new mechanic of a teleporter. Okay? And the way that a teleporter works is that if you look at the teleporter, there is a UI that comes up that says teleport to it. And if you're holding an object, you teleport to it with the object. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that means you can get an object to a place that you can't normally get it to.
Right.
Because the teleporter could be somewhere that you can't just carry objects to.
Yeah, that's right.
So I thought, well, that's got to be it, and there is a place you can go where you can get a connector and you can see that teleporter. So there we go. That's the whole chain. That's 4 different puzzles that you would be combining. Anyway, it would have been awesome. And it would have been probably the most memorable star puzzle in the game had it worked like that, but it doesn't.
Well.
And I'm going to tell you how it works. I'm only going to, talk about this one because it's just representative.
Yeah.
So here's the real solution. The cliffside thing, that was correct. Yeah, you really are supposed to get the laser out of there. And I told you how there's no straight shot to Pandora.
Yeah.
But on the top of a mountain of like a tiny pixel, there's like a secret connector just built into the mountain.
Okay. And you pointed at that.
That's it.
Okay, there you go. Well,
yep. So you just pointed at that, and then it's already pointed the right way, or I don't know. I forget the final step, but that's the
gist
basically of it. You do that, and that's it.
Right.
So a thing that felt like it should have been like this really elaborate connecting of 4 puzzles is like a find the pixel secret extra thing with just one step. It's a big dropping of the ball on every aspect of the concept of a star puzzle.
Yeah, that's really, that's kind of the worst type of difficulty, right? It's like, having an elaborate puzzle where you're going through 4 different puzzles, kind of like Talos Principles 1 style. What's so nice about it is that all the tools are there. You can see them and you can kind of like rack your brain around the possibilities of it. But like, trying to see the pixel from a million miles away is not really, it's not clever. It's just like kind of a hard thing to see, right? And that doesn't really add the depth that you're probably thinking that it would add to your game. This extra dimensional thinking with all these puzzles, that's what makes you feel super smart. And it feels good, right? To kind of figure out how all these puzzles interact with each other. but it also adds the depth that you actually want in your game.
Yeah. So there are a few more things of that nature where there's a pretty large world and there's just something like around one little corner somewhere that's like another, object that you need.
Yeah. Well,
where it doesn't have the same kind of satisfaction of what you're exactly right. That it felt like in Talos 1 that you had like a tools, like a palette you're painting with, and your tools start out as like within this puzzle, there's these 3 objects. That's what I have to paint with. But then the star puzzles are like, oh, actually puzzle 1 and 2 and 3 as a whole are now my palette, because there's like a box in that one. And so maybe I can get a box out, and there's a connector in this one. And so maybe I can get both of those out and do a thing. Yeah. So that was an interesting kind of puzzle in the way that finding, one extra connector on a mountain was not.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that you mentioned teleporters and, there's going to be these puzzle mechanics, but we didn't want to spoil it earlier. But now that we're in the spoiling mood, let's talk about some of those new puzzle mechanics. And also we could talk about the ones they left out from Talos 1 going to this one. So yeah, can you tell me about those puzzle mechanics, some of the more interesting ones, how they work, and kind of expand at least the normal puzzles, the good part of the game?
Yeah. Earlier in our discussion here, I mentioned how I felt like the first one is really an extension of what the game was already doing. And so it was a really good job to give you like familiar, but more. So what I meant there, you are familiar with a connector. So you shoot like a red laser at a connector, and then that lets you redirect the red laser somewhere else.
Correct.
So they have a new object. I forget the name of it, but it can combine a blue and red beam.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you can shoot a blue at it and a red at it, then it will emit a green, a new color.
Yeah.
And so now they have a bunch of puzzles that involve this third color
in
this new object. And I thought it was pretty cool. Like on the one hand, you could say, well, they don't really need to make that. Is it needless complication? If you were cynical, but I'm not going to say that. Like, I get that point of view, but it does feel like what we were doing, but one more step.
Yeah.
It allows the puzzles to be like a little bit more complicated now that there's this green in the mix, and different ways that you might get it. That I found that interesting. Another mechanic that is in the same category of like kind of an extension of what you had before. I don't know the real names of these things, but alternator is what I would call it. So if you shoot a red at it, it emits a blue. If you shoot a blue at it, it emits a red. So now you can make some new puzzles that couldn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
Because of this. Yeah. And that one, and they end up using that in some pretty interesting ways. I already told you about the teleporter. The teleporter is super fun. But the teleporter is also like emblematic of I feel like a fundamental conceptual problem with the whole design. Okay. So I think you immediately can see the fun factor. It's a teleporter.
Yeah.
You can just be somewhere instantly, and it's like breaking the rules. And you can carry a thing to a new place.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. So they come up with puzzles that make sense, that are fine. There's really like no problem with how they use it, I think. But here's the big problem. Overall, it's the stars again. Within a puzzle, the teleporter is used just fine. But what about between puzzles? I told you that whole elaborate story about how I was going to teleport a connector into the puzzle. But what I didn't tell you is, well, why wasn't that whole thing I said an alternate solution? Because the way I described it, it seems like even if there was a connector on a mountain somewhere, that the elaborate thing that I did would also work. But it doesn't, because they have an extra rule, which is, if you're looking at the teleporter, you get some UI that lets you teleport to it. But if you're standing outside the puzzle, then it won't work. And it feels so like slapped on. Like you can be standing behind all sorts of things and it'll work. There's some bars, a vertical bar, like a jail. You can't walk through that, but you can teleport through it. There's purple doors like that block objects inside a puzzle, like, not going from the outside to the inside, but inside the puzzle, there's purple doors. You can teleport through those. But if you're outside the puzzle through a purple door, or if you're like way high up, so you're not even going through a purple door, you're like just looking down at a puzzle, you can't ever teleport in.
Yeah.
And that right there, someone on the team should have said, what an ultimate failure of transgression. Like, what we could do is do some real hard work in restricting where has teleporters and what angles you can get on, and we can make puzzles about getting objects from one puzzle to another with these teleporters, all carefully designed. And they just didn't do any of that. You just can't do it.
That's yeah. I mean, you're just kneecapping your game to some extent by doing that, right? You're just like, here's a tool of like really high potential for fun, just something that's fun. Like, let's say it doesn't solve any of the puzzles, but it's just like a fun thing to do. But like, you remove it,
and a fun tool for transgression, right? Like, I've snuck a thing into another puzzle or whatever,
right? Yeah. So I mean, to me, that's like kind of the worst thing you can do. It's like, you want your game, you want the most maximum fun if you can get away with it. They're just like, well, we don't want people to think that there's this alternate way to get this star, right? But I think that's a total mistake.
Well, this will shed a little bit of light on what you're wondering there. In Talos 1, you are familiar with how you can take a box out from a puzzle sometimes.
Yeah.
Not all the time, right? Like,
yeah, it depends.
If the wall is too short or something, here and there, it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay, there's something that I'm sure that some people in the audience are just chomping at the bit to complain about or argue about here. So I want to clarify this. There's kind of two ways that we need to think about that concept of stealing those objects from puzzles. One way is the way that I'm talking about here, where we're regular players. We're not using glitches. We're just finding that, like, within the normal physics of the game, you can jump out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it should be noted in Talos 1, it was on purpose. It was designed that way.
Yeah, right. Yes. Now, there's a different kind of stealing objects, which I will refer to as like the speedrunner method. Mm-hmm. So in the world of speedrunning Talos 1, you can take anything from anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
you can get a paint can, a thing that you don't even know what it is, I'm sure, and you can jump extra high. You can also like look down with a jammer and jump in a certain way and get too high and get into places you're not supposed to get.
Yeah.
I watched some Talos 2 videos yesterday after I had beat everything. It's super weird. They okay, you know how if there's a force field, you can't just pick up an object like through the force field.
Yeah.
Or through a purple door, because the purple doors exist to stop objects from going through.
That's right. Yeah.
So if you're just like looking at an object on the other side of a purple door, you can't pick it up. But what these speedrunners are doing is, let's say there's a door, like there's stone, here, and then in the middle there's a place you can walk through. Mm-hmm. That's purple.
Yeah.
So what they do is they move over here, so they're like mostly behind the stone, but they can just a little bit see in through the purple door. For some weird reason, if you line up just right, you can glitch the object through the purple door.
Yeah, right.
So that lets them get anything anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. The game developers don't want you to do that. And that is not what we're talking about.
That's right.
Like, yes, the game has glitches and the developers want to fix those glitches, but there is like a kind of on purpose ability to steal things that the first one had that this one really doesn't. They've toned it down to almost zero. There's one box in like all of Talos 2 that I think they want you to steal. And I think they built the whole level to let you do it. And that's it. Like everywhere else, they're like, no, we're not doing that anymore. So when you hear that story, when I tell you everything is child-proofed, everything is like no more stealing objects. And then you learn, the teleporter, you can't use it at all if you're outside a puzzle. You're like, yeah, of course, because whoever made the first decision made the second decision. It's the same disappointing ethos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's what we meant by like the fun being missed. It's like the design on purpose just remove that stuff, and it's less fun and open because of that.
Let me just quickly run through the other mechanics. There's one I want to emphasize because I know you're going to care about it. But the other ones, just to be complete.
Yep.
There's a thing called an accumulator, which is pretty fun. I'm going to put it in the same category of just extension of what we were doing before. So it's kind of like a connector, like you get a red light to it or something, but then it sucks up the red light and it's like, it's in a red globe now on your object. You can carry it around and now you can shoot it wherever you want. So you basically like make a portable source.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get red to it, you can carry it around and shoot red somewhere else. Yeah, they use that one really well. There's a thing called an activator, which is a ultimate fantasy. You turn that on, you power it, and then it makes a big kind of force field, like a globe. And then everything within the force field is turned on. So a door or something. Normally you use a jammer to open a door.
Yeah.
But if the door is inside the force field of the activator, then it opens. So you can open things that are like, let's say there's like a green target where you need green light to open this door. Yeah. Or an activator and no green light.
Right.
Because the activator can do anything.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's almost too powerful,
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like it was a bit challenging for them to make puzzles that use the activator because of how powerful it is, but they did it.
Okay.
They pulled it off.
Right.
Another kind of interesting one. I don't know what you would think of this one, but there's a table. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a piece of furniture and it has an object. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like kind of baked into it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you can do is you can go up to it and you can give it an object in your hand and then take the object on the table. So but you can't just take the object on the table unless you give it something.
Right.
So what that lets them do is like, they make a puzzle and they're like, we're going to give you 3 different objects, but we don't want you to ever have all 3 at once.
Right.
Because one of them always has to be
on the table.
On that table. In Talos 1, they actually organically did that. Like with how the puzzles are made, they made it like, we'll give you some objects, but this one can never leave this room just because of how it all works. And they kind of hard coded it with this table. So I get why, because it just makes it easier, to create the situation.
Yeah.
It kind of lacks a fun factor though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's another object that shoots a gravity beam where it creates like a cylinder that goes 1,000,000 miles, that within that cylinder gravity is reversed. It's okay. I could have done without it. There's no problem with it.
Okay.
But whatever.
Yeah.
And another one that you get really early, I forgot to mention this one. It's a good fantasy fulfillment too, is there's a driller. What that means is you point it at a certain kind of wall and then it makes a hole in that wall.
Oh, yeah.
Again, what a fantasy, because in Talos 1, so often you're like, this laser, I have to make this line from here to here, but there's all these walls in the way. If only I could just drill a hole through the wall.
Yeah. Right.
On that one, they come up against the same problem that I think the game Portal does. In Portal, portals are so powerful, the ability to, go from one portal here to another portal there, and you can place them wherever you want, that it is a bit tough to make puzzles when you give the player something that powerful.
Oh, yeah.
So Portal had to create the concept of like a wall that is not a portalable surface.
Yeah.
A wall that you can't shoot the portal to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's fine. But in Portal 2, they had been, doing this so long and wanted new, fresh things. They end up needing to put so many walls that are non-portalable that you hardly have like spaces to use the portal in some of the areas. And it's very disappointing.
Yeah.
The driller is the same way, because like, imagine if you could just drill anything. Pretty hard to make puzzles, huh?
Yeah.
So what they did was, what if you can hardly drill anything ever? What if there's only a very few walls?
Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Maybe if they had more time to think about it, they can come up with really good puzzles without that limitation.
Okay, here's the crowd pleaser. They fixed the recording puzzles. They're all gone.
Oh, great.
And yes, thank goodness. And they're all replaced with a new thing. I don't know what you call it, a clone, another copy of yourself. So there's some puzzles where there's another copy of you just standing around.
Yeah.
And if you look at yourself, kind of like if you look at the teleporter,
Yeah.
there's a UI that lets you press a button and then you switch to be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So you move around here, but then you like, maybe there's a guy in an inaccessible area somewhere else.
Yeah.
But you can now be him and you can move some things around in that area.
Yeah.
And you can come back. Or you can interact with each other. Like, one guy holds up a thing and another one jumps on, but it's so much easier to deal with than the recording thing. It's
And it does
incredible fix.
And it does exactly the thing that the recorder did, which is like just double you. It's the whole point of it.
Yeah, that's right.
But
it's clearly the response to the recorder and like, a quality job on that. I'm really happy with it.
Good. It's a good idea and concept, but that recorder was not fun. Okay, cool.
What about Tetris?
Oh, God, yeah.
The inclusion of Tetris in the first game, I said was stupid and doesn't belong, and so they should just cut it.
Yeah.
I think you agreed, if I remember.
Yeah. I was just like, they could have just been like, okay, maybe not stars, because stars were another thing, but they could have just been like keys or just whatever.
Well, I've got some bad news for you.
No, they back.
Doubled down on the Tetris. It's back with a vengeance. What if instead of just a simple 2D Tetris that we were doing before, how about this? You have to actually build a bridge to walk across that uses Tetris pieces, big 3D Tetris pieces, and you got to rotate them around in 3D and cycle through them. And which one? Oh, geez. Should it start with an L piece? Let's see. Oh, no. It turns out you can't really get to the other side. Okay, let's start over again. It's tedious. It adds nothing. They're barely puzzles. A kind of weird thing going on is I personally did extremely well at them. Like, I don't know if I just have a sense for it, but I was able to solve most of them really quickly. A couple of them took me longer. But I'm trying not to let that color me, because I know how long it can take if you're going through all the options. It just doesn't add anything. I don't know what's going on with Tetris and Crow Team.
You would have to ask them, because I think that's silly and nonsensical. It should just be keys or something. Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and talk about the story, because that's actually a really big aspect of Talos 1. Yes, it's a puzzle game first and foremost, but the story is so interesting, so well written. The theme is so strong in Talos 1 that, to me, for Talos Principle 2, outside of the puzzles, the story would be the second big thing that I would be looking for in terms of the expansion of that. So I'd love to hear about the story. And now that we're in spoiler territory, just kind of let everyone know what that's about.
I think the setup of the story is really good and makes sense. Right. So in Talos 1, you are basically one of many AIs. And the whole story there is testing which AI is clever enough, curious enough, transgressive enough, creative, to be the one that gets to the next stage of evolution in the world, right, and gets put into a robot body. So Talos 2 takes place 1,000 years later. And the character who succeeded in doing, the character that you played in Talos 1.
Yeah.
That character is called Athena in Talos 2.
Okay.
So that's the first robot, what is it called? The Noema project that the Alexandra Drenan's project created, that process created. Athena then was able to create or wake up other AIs as well. So she first woke up 12 of them, or maybe 11. I don't know if she was one of the 12, but some small number. And they struggled to build a society. And, they have to gather resources and have shelter and so on.
Yeah.
So they overcame that struggle and they built a city, and the city is called New Jerusalem. I think they actually built another city or two along the way, but the one that the game takes place in is called New Jerusalem. And another part of this setup, which is very important, is that Athena has disappeared, and yet her directive is still around. Okay, what her big idea was that she wanted to grow the population until it reached a point of 1,000 members, and then very on purpose wanted to stop growing because the problem with humanity is that it grew out of control and it used up all the resources and created tons of problems. It was reckless and had ambition that was out of scale with what was responsible to do. So she's going the other way and saying, we're just going to get to 1,000. And then you, the player character, are the 1,000th robot, the last robot.
Okay.
And you're called 1K because
you're the 1,000th.
That's everyone's nickname for the 1,000th robot.
Okay.
So I think that's a pretty interesting setup.
Yeah.
And it's really clear early on that what they're going for is a story that's about that civilization struggling with stagnation. Because if it doesn't grow past that 1,000, even though it could find the resources and, have all the more varied of a society with more personalities and more ideas and more life, basically, because these are lives.
Yeah.
It could do that, but it's decided not to from this limit. And I think that it's on purpose that the limit is chosen to be absurdly small. Like the kinds of problems that they're worried about are legitimate problems, but they would occur at the scale of billions.
Right.
I think it even mentions that at some point in the story.
Right.
Like if there were billions of robots, these would be really important problems, but not if there's 1,200, 1,500, 100,000.
Right.
These are not reasonable limits, really.
Right. So the question is raised about why the limit is so low.
There's basically a society built around this limit. It's almost like a religion.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of people that really believe in it and others don't. So we see that play out. And all of that is pretty good. But let's move on to what is less good.
Okay.
I mentioned that there are these Greek figures like Prometheus and so on, these big magical blue figures that talk to you and appear just in hologram form several times. So the robot characters don't understand what they are. They're a mystery.
Okay.
What are they? And then when we follow them, we see follow their energy trails or whatever, we find it's like a new area that we can go and explore. And that new area is full of puzzles. And that new area, if we scan it, like look at the molecules and the concrete and so on, we find very weird readings that don't make any sense. One of the characters says that for all he knows, that concrete has been there 1 billion years or yesterday. He can't tell which. Because it's not normal matter for some reason. So something or someone has made a whole new set of puzzles in a whole new world, and there's a weird Greek theme going on and Greek characters talking to us. And they really slow play this. They let a lot of hours go by where you don't know why any of that really is or what is going on. And then the plot starts to center around how one of the characters who is a pretty likable guy gets kind of sucked into the matrix of this new world, like disappears, like we need to rescue him maybe. Okay. Also going on is that we learn Athena, who that was you in the previous game, the Jesus.
Yep.
The
first protagonist.
The first.
Yeah.
She's disappeared, and what is she doing and what is she up to? But we find out that actually her and another character named Cornelius have in the backstory, we don't know what they're doing right now, but in previous years, they snuck off together into some new place and built a new person. And it's framed as a child and it's voiced by a child actress. Okay. And what Athena's trying to say is that she thinks the civilization is too stagnant in its thinking. It needs to be new and bold and creative, and like a new person needs to be raised outside of it to not be influenced by it. And something goes wrong, and that new person, dies, or is their consciousness is disappeared. Similar to so now you have two characters like that who were with us and then they weren't. Mm-hmm. And here's the crux of it now. A lot of the story, this not the backstory, not the legend, but a lot of the story that happens as you are playing the game mm-hmm. is about recovering those two characters. And can it be done? And if we do all these steps, maybe we could try to find them or get them back. And it feels so small and so what a human brain would want the story to be or something.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, these robots are way advanced and it can do all sorts of things. And I'm sure they have the ability to back up files like consciousness. And they're basically portrayed as like a step of evolution beyond us. So I feel like they should have problems that are like different than this.
Yeah, definitely. It should be like kind of alien, really, because like it would be the AI life would have very different problems from what we have.
Yes, I'm reminded of something said by Joe Haldeman. I'm sure you don't know who he is, but he is a science fiction author. He wrote the Forever War and then later Forever Peace, or 2 books. Mm-hmm. He was also president of the Ernest Hemingway Appreciation Society. And I met him at MIT where he taught a class on science fiction. And he made the statement that I've remembered all these years, that in sci-fi, aliens have to have human problems and be about humans. And then people were like, what? No, they don't, and he gave counterexamples.
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, well, some of these counterexamples we can just throw in the garbage immediately because they're not even sci-fi. Like they're not science fiction in his mind. They're like, when you take a Western and then you just kind of dress it up with sci-fi trappings, he's like, that doesn't count.
Yeah.
Like old Star Trek being a wagon train to the stars.
Yeah.
He was having none of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, okay, let's get rid of those. But if you want to do like a more serious sci-fi that like actually thinks about science and its implications and it actually dreams up some aliens, those can feature in your story. But if your story is like about them and their society and their personalities, and it's intended to be fully alien, really, then it won't be interesting to humans. And like just inherently, fundamentally, the aliens must be a reflection of humans for narrative reasons.
Right.
He was real big on that. And I kept thinking about that in Talos 2, because I bet you someone made that argument in the writer's room and it's like, that is why it's okay. But I know even Joe Haldeman probably wouldn't have liked this treatment because there's something diminutive about it. There's something eerie about having 1,000 robots, except one of them has a child voice, but they're all children in a way.
Yeah.
Why are we projecting childhood onto only one of them to pull at heartstrings? I don't know. I just keep thinking small. It's too small of a story.
Well, it's funny that you say that because like I understand that argument about how you need to have human problems for these alien characters so that we connect. So I get that. And to some extent, I would agree to that. But like, there's a way where you take where you can create the analogies of human problems with just alien details. So like a show that both you and I like is Orville. Orville has a bunch of human problems, but they're just dressed up really well in alien stuff and it like really works. goes into things of like, you have the Mocklins who are like supposedly an all male society. And then it goes into the gender identities of that kind of stuff. It still feels very alien because the concept around them of being like an all male, weird looking alien thing still makes it feel like it's alien. I feel like that's the type of thing you'd want to do for Talos, is just like, think like a human problem, but you just got to dress it up really well. But finding people who are lost is just not a good way to dress that up.
I know exactly what you're saying there about sci-fi being able to talk about social issues. That's the tradition of Star Trek and Twilight Zone. Both of those works, both of those shows were able to take important social issues that couldn't really have been directly talked about at the time on TV.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been too controversial, and they can put a veneer of aliens or otherworldliness to it and talk about it.
Yeah.
So they were way ahead of their time and progressive. And it's obvious that the Orville is trying to channel that. I think successfully.
Oh, yeah.
If you ask me,
yeah.
I think it's really good. They're trying to do that. Talos is not, I don't think that, okay. Some people actually think they are trying to do that.
Right.
Honestly, because it's about like, well, Talos one, like, global warming, is kind of the big threat that we face in real life, and the threat that the fictional characters faced. We don't know what it is, some kind of virus or whatever. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Disease that kills everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got the shape of global warming.
Yeah. This environmentalism,
and the global warming is mentioned in Talos 2 as well.
Right.
So you could, there's somebody out there that's saying, yeah, Talos 2 is trying to do what the Orville does, but I don't think so, because I've told you this very personal story about loss
Mm-hmm.
that is kind of central to it.
Yeah.
They seem to be wanting to do. There is something I wanted to tell you that's good.
Yes.
Okay. And it's more about the theme than the story itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it could maybe point to what the story could have been.
The theme in Talos Principles 1 of transgression is so at the forefront. It's what makes that narrative so interesting, and it's what keeps the player going, not just through the gameplay, but through the story as well.
Well, to make this point, I'm going to have to tell you one more thing about the story that's very relevant. I forgot. I told you that there's these magic blue holograms of Greek people, and that there's all these new puzzles, and that there's concrete that's made in a strange way. Well, what's the answer to all that? And I said they were slow playing it. They waited so many hours until the very end to tell you what in the world is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they did it because they know it's disappointing, and they're trying to stretch out as much as they can before they have to say it out loud.
Sure.
Well, it's the most cliche, most phoned in, most sophomoric thing you could possibly imagine. And that is that it's all a dream.
Right. It's all a dream.
So it's Athena's dream. What actually happened is Athena developed the ability to manipulate matter, to do things far beyond what we could ever imagine, what even the robots could imagine. And she worried about, what do we do with it? This power is so powerful that it could, be misused. The whole world could be destroyed by it.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't know what to do with it. And so she went into a kind of sleep. And in her sleep, she dreamed something that created all of these puzzles for us as an echo of what she had experienced. She had tried to solve all these puzzles herself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And in her actual experience, there was Elohim that was like the dungeon master saying, like, don't do it.
Yep.
And so she cast herself, kind of her fragmented mind, in different Greek roles of characters telling us not to do it.
Okay.
And it's very flimsy and pathetic.
Okay.
Okay. But let's turn to a positive note.
But those are the details. Let's get to the actual, like, what it all means.
There's something that I find legitimately very interesting.
Okay.
And then I'm going to think about this for a long time. For years, I'm going to remember this about this game. So maybe that's a plus, right?
Sure.
Because, I don't care about some of the elements of this story, but there is this concept that's pretty cool. Let me read you a little paragraph that you come across in the game. I think that will explain it. This is called The New Theology. It is by George Bernard Shaw. I didn't actually look this up, but I assume it's really by George Bernard Shaw in real life. And it goes like this. The object of the whole evolutionary process is to realize God. That is to say, instead of the old notion that creation began with a God, a personal being perfect, created something lower than himself, the aim of the new technology is to turn that process the other way and to conceive of the force behind the universe working up through imperfection and mistake to a perfect, organized being, having the power of fulfilling its highest purpose. In a sense, there is no God as yet achieved, but there is the force at work making God, struggling through us to become an actual organized existence, enjoying what too many of us is the greatest conceivable ecstasy, the ecstasy of the brain and intelligence, actually conscious of the whole, and with executive force and capable of guiding it to perfectly benevolent and harmonious end. That is what we are working to. Do you get what he's saying? Like, to paraphrase, he's saying people usually think about God as like a perfect being that could only make bad photocopies of itself. It can only make like men who aren't as cool as a God and they have tons of flaws. Why can't the God make something as good as itself? Why can't it make something better? So he's saying it's the other way around. We are imperfect. We have all sorts of problems, but we can become better over time. We can build better selves, better future people. And if you follow that long enough, what you would get would be a God. Okay, now in Talos 2, humans are gone. That was 1,000 years ago. What's left is the next step of humans, which is these robots. Humans created something that it's more durable. You know, they have their bodies are stronger than ours. They don't die in just a few years. So they're superior to humans in several aspects. And they're not soulless either. They all have personalities and consciousness. So they really are portrayed as a next step in evolution. Okay.
Yeah.
And what then happens basically is that race creates something that's even beyond that, something that even they couldn't comprehend. And in the ending, like there's different endings, you know, but in the ending where like you do everything and you solve all the puzzles and get all the stars and all that, which of course I did, you reassure Athena that it is correct to pursue this, that like you can't just have an incredible technology like this and then not use it. And there's musings about how if the robots collectively don't do anything, then what will happen in the universe is like the sun will go out, Saturn's rings will fall apart, and life will eventually die. And it talks about this very large scale where there just isn't going to be life anymore.
Yeah.
But by using this machine, the robots can do anything. They can create new worlds. They can create new beings. They can make it so that billions and billions of years from now, the entire universe is full of life that they think is beautiful to have grown. And there's an image there, like literally on the screen, of your character walking, and beneath your feet, grass grows almost magically with this new power. And you create a tree. And as soon as they showed that, I thought, okay, I know what we're doing here. I mean, you could have created anything that anyone could have imagined, but they chose a tree because of the saying only God can make a tree. So the concept here is like human, next step robot, and then next step thing that's indistinguishable from a God.
Yeah.
It is exactly George Bernard Shaw's progression, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that's a great theme. That's something you could really build a really strong narrative around. It sounds like they struggled, but that high level idea is really good. I'm glad it was at least explored, because there's not a whole lot of stories like that, but It sounds like they could have done a little better.
One last thought on this before we wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, like, let's say you wanted to tell a new story.
Yeah.
Okay, you're writing a story, and you wanted the story to involve a society that's overly conservative. Okay, and then there's some people in the society that they want to do a new thing that is looked down on.
Yeah.
Okay. So far this story seems fine,
Mhm.
right? But now I'm gonna make it difficult. Well, what is it that these new people want to do? Do they have a new kind of soda flavor? Like, is some trivial thing?
Right, yeah.
No. Okay. They want to do something absolutely disruptive.
Mhm.
They want to create, well, real AI would be one thing on the level of this disruption. Or another thing on that level would be like, they want to allow the editing of genes just however you want,
Mm-hmm.
to create the DNA for completely new beings.
Mm-hmm.
So they just want to start creating like a completely new race of beings that they've engineered. Okay, so imagine you're writing this story, and these characters want to do something that is that level of disruptive, something that would completely change or replace the entire society. If you're writing that story, I don't know how you make those characters sound ultimately correct. They sound like tech bros. They sound like Elon Musk with an insane idea.
Yeah.
Or some Black Mirror character that it has no concept of the repercussions and ethical concerns of the power that they're trying to wield.
Yeah.
Okay. It's really hard. Like it's actually easy if what they want to do is more trivial.
Yeah.
Then they're being constrained by society. But if they want to do something that's this level, then I don't know how you make them sound right. But Talos Principle 2 is in a special place in any story that I've ever seen. It's already taken place one step later. We already went from humans to the next level of organism beyond that.
Right.
So we already saw that it can work.
Mm-hmm.
So when those second level beings are like, should we go to a third level? It's a whole new spin, because now the audience is thinking like, well, yeah, probably you should.
Mm-hmm.
And all these people that want to stagnate and have only 1,000 people in the society, they actually seem like they are wrong and bad.
Yeah, definitely.
But you'd be hard pressed to pull that off without the extra level, just regular humans. And someone wants to do something this crazy.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I don't want to say it's a missed opportunity because they did tell the story in some way, but it is a unique set of narrative circumstances that allows you to tell that story in a way where it sounds palatable.
That's pretty much all I wanted to say. So I'll sum it up by saying the puzzles were good. The stars were mostly non-existent and lacking. The story setup was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the theme was interesting. The story is disappointing.
Yeah. There's a lot of ups and downs, it sounds like. Sounds like a lot of ups and downs.
I want people to buy it, though. Go buy it so there can be a Talos 3 because I want to play it.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it still sounds like it's something I should probably check out because at least the game is right. The game part, the puzzles, which is what you're going to be doing.
I bet you'd really enjoy the puzzles.
Yeah.
They're very well done.
Well, thank you again for sharing your thoughts on Talos Principle 2. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Okay.